right, everybody, happy Friday. Welcome back to another episode of Teens No Cap. I'm your host, Charity Chaffee. I'm a teen mental health specialist, and this is the show where we talk about teen mental health. We talk about parenting teens. We talk about working with teens, providing with teens. And today, we're going to do another Reddit thread, which is one of my favorite types of episodes, because I love answering people's questions and giving them insight and helping to support them when sometimes public forums feel like a safe space. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, this is the first one, which is a good one to start with. My 14-year-old daughter acts different with her dad than with me. She's manipulating me. Sad face. Has anyone else experienced this? I'm divorced. My daughter has been saying she's always angry and unhappy, crying, extremely moody at times. This morning she told me that she never wanted to talk to me again and wants to end her life. Once we got to the place where we're talking again, we were outside of the school, she's tearing up constantly and doesn't want to go into school. Her stomach hurts from anxiety and she has me seriously concerned. She also says she doesn't want to live with her dad, etc. I just found out she's nothing like this at her dad's house. She's not claiming mental health issues with him. Like, what the fuck? Am I getting worked up? Or am I getting worked? She's going to force me to ride her ass like he does. More information added. Last night she did say she feels safe to talk to me, but she's just not sharing info with me. She's losing her shit on her sister and me. She was recently suspended from school for 3 days due to her mean act towards her sister that was visible to everyone. I'm catching her lying to my face regarding using THC vapes and alcohol. She's trying not to go to her dad's and her grandparents because they are stern and have more rules. I was really venting here when I wrote my initial message. I need to remember the bottom line of her why for her behaviors, not the behaviors themselves. Okay, this was posted a couple days ago, and I read part of the thread really quickly before I started reading it. But so we have to think about teens in terms of like whole humans, right? When people use the word manipulative, it's hard because even manipulation comes from a space of wanting to get your needs met. Manipulation with the intention of getting your need met is just still trying to get your need met, right? It's just doing it in a way that feels kind of like roundabout. But we have to think about behavior is communication and not necessarily define it or add things in like you feel manipulated is different than she's manipulating me, right? Feeling manipulated, I would love to explore that with you if I was like working with you as like your kid's therapist or, you know, as like even your therapist or a parenting coach. Behavior at the end of the day is communication. So we can label a lot of behavior as this, and this, but unless we're having that conversation with our teens or we're having the conversation with our clients, we can assume a lot of things that aren't right, right? So for this mom, the first thing that I would say is I would have her really sit and talk with like her kid's therapist. It does sound like, as I read through the thread right before, that her kid is in therapy, which is great. But I would have a sit down with a therapist. I would like schedule a call, even if like your kid isn't involved, that's fine. And share all of the things, all of your concerns that you have about what you're seeing. So first things first, behavior is communication. Second thing, sit down with your kid's therapist. Third thing, which is really tricky, we are always going to have different relationships with our teens than they do with the other parent, right? Neither one of those means that it's bad or wrong or whatever. They're just different, right? Different because of levels of trust, different because of safety, different because of expectations. And it very well could be that like this teen doesn't feel she's gonna be like heard or like nurtured or accepted. It could also just mean that she feels safe with you in a way that maybe she like doesn't at dad's, right? But really we have no understanding of any of that until we're talking with her and until we're like working through it with therapeutic stuff. I personally feel like when we're working with teenagers, like they don't exist in a vacuum. So you should be having some regular contact with like your kid's therapist, or if you are a teen therapist, you should be having some sort of regular contact. Frequency can be determined based on need, but you should be having regular contact to really make sure you're getting the entire scope of what that teen is going through. I love a lot of the responses on this were just really great. Well, the first one was, why do you assume she's manipulating you? Which I just think could be so great. And then another person commented about being able to get in to speak with your kid's therapist ASAP, wanting to like collaborate and work with schools. If you have a kid who's struggling in school, it may be time to reach out and get like IEP or like some sort of 504 special education like support testing, because it could be a situation where like she actually is having a hard time in school, which is why she doesn't want to be there. And sometimes we find indirect ways as humans to get out of the situations that we don't want to be in. So, but she has a lot of really good answers. I would definitely have a sit down with the therapist and talk through everything. But all is not lost. I think there's a lot of hope here. And I don't think that we can assume behavior is manipulation just because it's only happening in one space. So, all right, that was the first one. I'm going to pull up the second one. Ooh, this is a long one. Okay, let's go. Advice on removing teen daughter from her father's house. I'm at a loss about what to do with my 16-year-old daughter. She has zero behavioral issues at school, but at home, she can be hell. Defiant, mean to her brothers, destructive, etc. She's been living with her dad out of state for the past 4 years. I tried to have her with me when she was 12, but her behavior was so difficult that it severely impacted my mental health, and I have a diagnosed mental health condition. These days, we talk daily. I visit about every 3 weeks, and we spend wonderful summers together in California, hiking, going to the beach, just relaxing. There's rarely conflict then, probably because I'm not asking her to do much. The conflict with her dad, however, has escalated so badly, so much that the police have been involved multiple times. My ex-husband is a difficult person. I clearly couldn't live with him, and now he's showing the same toxic behavior toward her that he did towards me. There's no physical abuse, but he screams at her, berates her, corners her, and barges into her room without knocking. The last incident was last Friday. Her phone had broken, and she repeatedly asked to use his phone to call me. He refused. He's extremely controlling. Things escalated until he had her backed against a wall, screaming at her. Following her therapist's advice, she called the police. She did hit him in the face after he cornered her, and because he had a bruise and she didn't, the police took her to juvenile detention. In Texas, parents are legally allowed to use physical discipline, so the system often sides with them. Oh, that's so hard. I hate seeing that. I don't ever think physical discipline is a thing that should be used. She was in detention from Friday until Tuesday, and I had zero contact with her. I flew in Wednesday morning, and I'm literally staying at my ex-husband's house just to prevent more conflict. She's begging to come back with me. She says she can't live with him anymore, that she'd rather be in a group home than there. He tells her to leave all the time and even told me verbatim, I don't want her. He lives in a small, fast-growing town with a fancy high school and the whole small-town lifestyle, but I can't move there. There are no jobs, and my 88-year-old dad lives with me in California. When my mom died of pancreatic cancer 7 years ago, her dying wish was for me to take care of my dad. He's healthy and independent, but he doesn't cook or do laundry, so I handle the household and the yard. I've basically stepped into my mother's role. My dad is fine with my daughter coming back. He's actually excited, and truthfully, I don't see that I have much of a choice. I know I'm morally obligated to remove her from the situation. Still, I'm scared. Her defiance and outbursts can be extreme, and my own mental health is stress-related. I manage it by keeping a simple, structured routine. I'm not afraid of parenting her. I'm afraid of losing myself in the process. Of course, she'll be in therapy, and she'll attend an urban school here in Oakland with fewer resources than where she is now, but I have zero safety concerns. I even work at that school sometimes, and I know the environment well. Please weigh in. I truly believe bringing her back is the right thing to do, but I'm terrified of what that might mean for both of us. Ooh, this is a rough one. So, I understand the fear of losing yourself in the process, and I understand the anxiety of bringing her back with you and being a full-time parent to potentially a high-needs child. It very much sounds, though, like this is not a safe environment for her to be in, and I would want to remove her ASAP. The fact that she was diagnosed with DMDD, to me, feels very much like an indicator of like what life has been like in the home. Because again, behavior is communication. What is the behavior actually telling us? And I understand that like you had tried a lot of things before, that she had lived with you. She's also 4 years older at this point, and she's 16. And there are potentially a lot of options of like how to make that transition as like smooth as possible. I think obviously an adjustment like this is going to be hard. Like when we think about her nervous system and what her nervous system has been through in relation to all of this, her nervous system is a mess. And it is going to take time and patience and consistency and routine to truly work through that and to be in a space where she can really be like thriving, right? And I don't know entirely what happened kind of in the home, but I would really wonder if there are other traumatic things that have happened to her that she has not yet disclosed. So a few things. I think that you could absolutely help her make the transition back home and to be in some sort of like structured like treatment program where you're at that would really allow her to like settle in and get some like necessary like emotional first aid. I don't know all the supports that are available in California. Maybe some California like teen therapists can chime in, but this to me feels like if she's begging to come home with you, like she's in a space where, you know, potentially she's like ready to do that. So I would work on getting a plan in place where she can get support she needs, maybe out of the house at first, even if she's like in, you know, a facility for a hot second, a group home, something like that, just to kind of like help her like manage and understand more of those behaviors and what's happening for her. But I definitely think that this kid would benefit from like some intensive treatment. I would even think about like a general therapist for sure, but then also, you know, EMDR, etc. Maybe staying in touch with her last therapist that she's like seeing in Texas, but I would get her out of there. I think that's at the end of the day, that is a piece if you can, and get her into some sort of like extensive treatment program so that she is like safe, because her physical and emotional safety is going to be paramount in this process. And then I think from there, it's going to be working on repairing and building trust and repairing your relationship with her, because I don't know truly what she kind of like feels in terms of her connection with you. But I think about that. This is a really tough situation though, and I like respect all the different layers of it, and I also hope you're getting your own help, because it can be really challenging to try to navigate that and really what's best for everybody. So, all right. We'll jump into our third one. This one's labeled, "Did I take a conversation too far?" I have a 16-year-old daughter who is usually very mature for her age. She's great, highly independent, and intelligent. We were talking this evening and I was commenting about how cold it was and how I really felt for homeless people and where they sleep at night. She mentioned that she saw a bunch of homeless people recently and then said 90% of them are on drugs and any money given to them just goes to more drugs. She said, "It's kind of hard to have much sympathy for them." I turned to her and I said, "We're not on drugs, and do you realize with our financial situation that we're probably a week away from homelessness if your dad stops paying child support?" She thought about it and said, "Well, that wouldn't be me because I just couch surf with friends." I asked her what about her younger sibling, and she said he'd stay with me regardless of whether I was sleeping on the streets. I must admit this, and yes, I started it. It made me so upset. I told her I was horrified that she'd actually even say that. She exploded back, "I'm 16, you shouldn't be saying this stuff to me anyways." The reality is that it's very true. If he pulls the plug on child support, we are homeless. At this stage, I don't know if I was pushing too much adult stuff on her or she's just trying not to think about a potentially scary reality. Was I overstepping this? Personally, I think at her age that if she's happy to wander around on public transportation and watch the news, and go out at night in friends' cars, then she's old enough to accept conversations about tough social subjects. She's 17 in February, by the way. Or should I continue to leave her in her own bubble and keep this stuff to myself? I'm kind of torn about it upon reflection because I don't know if I'm in the right or wrong and how I should proceed going forward. We are living really close to the edge, and I'm constantly stressed about it. Many thanks in advance. All right, so before I read any of the comments on this, I'm just going to say I really think that we need to be having conversations about some of these things with teenagers. This seems, though, like it was potentially triggering for you to like have her say that. And I think that you probably didn't have this conversation the way you would have wanted to have it. So for instance, I think that giving teens information that helps them assess and understand a situation is helpful and important. And at the same time, I think that the stress of being a week away, if dad stops paying for child support, is probably not the helpful information in that, because it's very emotionally charged. And I think that like you can use the example of like every single one of us that's not a billionaire is closer to being on the streets than we are to being a billionaire every single day, right? And when we're thinking about how many people are struggling financially right now and going through different scenarios, we are always closer to being broke on the street than we are to being a billionaire. And I think that like part of this, you were triggered. I think she also was maybe caught off guard by the fact that like that information was put out there, you know, but I also think that it's like that, like you said, it's that hard line between like what information do we share as parents and what information do we not share them, right? Share with them. And I think for you, I would really want to push back and really have you think about like the purpose of her knowing that is what? The purpose of her knowing that we are a week away from being homeless because if dad stops paying child support is what? Versus the point of her knowing, hey, we're always closer to being homeless than we are to being billionaires, right? And every homeless family, every homeless situation, they have stories that back that. I think this is a good lesson for her to learn. And I know that like sometimes when you're exposed to a new idea, especially knowing that like we are all closer to being homeless, it can spike this kind of like defensive mechanism, because like of course a teenager wouldn't want to believe that. Of course a teenager wouldn't want, you know, to like be living with friends or like be living on the street, or for her family to be living on the street. And at the same time, it was probably a very big challenge to her own beliefs that people that are living on the street are all on drugs, right? And that's the only reason they end up on the street is because they're on drugs. So although you didn't start this conversation in the way that you maybe would have wanted to, it could be a really helpful thing to kind of continue putting in all of the layers of like having her understand homelessness, having her understand the different situations, having her understand the financial, you know, strain that a lot of families are in right now. And that it's not always just about, you know, drugs, etc. So I think there's lots of room for different conversations here where like you can have so much really great education. But I think like making it as personal as you did because you were triggered in that moment probably, was probably also really scary. So there is a part for her where she's probably also nervous, anxiety ridden, etc. about like, what if that does become us, right? And I think right now it is a really scary reality for a lot of people of like how close we are to like being on the street, you know, again, versus being billionaires. So sometimes things like this happen in conversations with teens, and I think you can make the best of it by adding in more education and more support and like really talking with her about her feelings and how it hurt, how it felt to hear that. So that you can get a little bit of her perspective too. But hey, we're not all perfect, and sometimes conversations like this can be turned into beautiful things. So don't give up on it. Okay, here we go. I'm so desperate to help my daughter. Please read and share your thoughts because I'm totally lost and I feel like I'm being buried alive. Okay. Girl, we got you. Actually, parent, we got you. I don't even know who this is. I gendered that way too fast. Okay. My 13, almost 14-year-old daughter is crumbling. It started when she first started middle school, got really bad, got better, and then got drastically bad again. Her moods are all over the place. She's having outbursts and massive meltdowns when anxious or overstimulated. Her self-esteem is garbage. She can't stay consistent with friends as she hermits herself for weeks at a time, to the point where her friends will text me and ask why she won't talk to anyone. I can't get anything out of her. She denies or gets angry. I've been trying to get her to therapy for 2 years and she refuses. I spent $600 for 6 weeks of her sitting there refusing to speak. Last month, she had a full psychological eval and was diagnosed with CPTSD, ADHD, and emotional dysregulation disorder. The day before we got the results, my daughter tried to commit suicide, and she almost succeeded. I'm so sorry, and I'm so glad she is alive. She spent a week in the hospital, and when she got out, she seemed to be doing much better. The doctor explained her diagnosis, and she felt a relief knowing her feelings had been validated. I thought we were finally getting the real her back. A week and a half later, she's back in the hospital. She had a random meltdown and kept saying she didn't want to be alive anymore. I just want to pause for a second. I'm going to keep reading this. But I want to put out there for everybody that the first week or two somebody is out of an inpatient setting is actually some of the most dangerous times you have in terms of mental health instability, because people do feel better, but they're often at higher risk for self-harm, suicide, etc. I hope someone said that to you, but I don't know if they did, so I just want to put that out there because I think you probably were doing the best you could do, and there is definitely that research that correlates. Okay, I thought we were finally getting the real her back. A week and a half later, she's back in the hospital. She had a random meltdown and kept saying she didn't want to be alive anymore. I stayed with her and she calmed down, and we agreed to go about our plans for the day and talk about it after some reflection and recalibration. A while later, I asked her if she still felt that way, because if she does, we have to keep her safe. She very calmly and rationally said she was suicidal, never wasn't, but felt like the new medicine made it easier for her to fake and she didn't want to be there anymore. She's now in an adolescent unit in a different facility. She hates it. She's miserable, but she doesn't want out because she doesn't feel like she's gotten the real, genuine, serious support she needs, nor has she made any progress. Today on the phone, we were having a good and living conversation, and she suddenly got serious and told me about how she was feeling there and how she hasn't gotten any better. Within the last few weeks, she's opened up about what life was like with her dad when her dad had her 50-50. She was absolutely emotionally abused and neglected and treated terribly. I could write a damn book. No wonder this child isn't okay. Oh my God, my heart goes out to these people. Okay. She said that a boy in her unit told her about how his parents were putting him in a mental health centered boarding school for teens, where they were able to get the help they need and focus on their mental health in a safe and stable environment while still being able to get the education at the same time. My question is this a hasty thing to jump into? My logic says to keep her close and safe while her new medication is taking effect, giving her lots of breathers and focusing on therapy, which is the one thing that she refuses. I don't know what she's expecting at this type of facility. I've been looking into some, and they are all very therapy based, many different kinds. So that could be good, in that it's part of her wellness plan, and I'm not the one making her do it. But sending her away just seems so drastic, and I believe she can get through this and all the support she could possibly have. But what if it's not enough? After what she's been through, she deserves to be surrounded by healing. She's never advocated for her own well-being, and she finally has. I don't know how I'd afford something like that, but I'd work 2 more jobs if it were the right thing for her. I'm not asking anyone to tell me what to do. I'm just asking for your thoughts, ideas, and opinions. I'm so lost. I need help. Oh my goodness. Okay, so my heart goes out to you both, and I really hope she's doing a little bit better at this point. The thing that I would say is that you're right. She is finally advocating for something that could be really helpful for her. And I think that at this age, it is so critical that she gets buy-in into whatever that treatment plan is. I also think that the hard part about a lot of inpatient and residential treatment programs is that healing and true change isn't necessarily what they're there for, right? Hospitalization isn't healing, it's stabilization. And stabilization from wanting to kill yourself, wanting to cause harm, wanting to attempt, etc. So being at a facility, like a inpatient kind of locked facility, it's not necessarily the place that you're going to get healing at, right? They're not meant to be long-term. They're meant to be stability. They're meant to kind of get them to the point where then they can move on to other like phases of treatment to actually get the help that they would need. The thing that I would say for this is that if she is in a place where she can think about different options for her mental wellness, I would have those conversations. Anyone that's part of her treatment team should know that those conversations are being had so that they can support all of that and potentially try to like figure out a plan of how to get from like inpatient stabilization to like a residential program. I will say too, I think it's so incredibly important to make sure that you have vetted the facility, that you have gone there, that you have visited, that you have like talked to dozens of people, read the reviews. The troubled teen industry is a thing, but that doesn't mean that every facility offering that is bad, right? It just means we have to be very picky about where we send kids, and we have to make sure that they have the buy-in for it. The other piece is that oftentimes a lot of those facilities don't necessarily want kids that are like actively in SI. And so it might be a little bit before she could get there anyway, but please make sure you're talking to her treatment team about like any of those options and seeing kind of like what, if anything, is also available in the state nearby, etc., that could be part of a long-term program. But because she was diagnosed with PTSD, chronic PTSD, and went through that abuse, it is going to take time to get her into a space where she feels comfortable and safe to work on all of this. But it is incredibly challenging to know what the right choice is. But I think, I read this thing the other day that was basically talking about how, if you made the wrong choice, like nothing is permanent, we can make a different choice. And I think that's really true in this situation. So suss out all the options, figure out like all the different types of programming, like really get serious about understanding next steps in terms of treatment, and then continue to have those conversations with her, because it's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, and it doesn't have to be a now or not situation either. But I hope this was about 2 weeks ago at this point. I think it was posted, but I hope that she's doing better at this point, and I hope you have information that would be helpful. But that's really hard. That's the one thing too I'll say is that I think that, she being in therapy is really could be helpful, but I also think like you as a parent, you also need support, and you also deserve support for everything that you are going through in terms of supporting your teen. So it can be really hard to get teenagers sometimes into therapy because there's lots of resistance, there's lots of fear, there's lots of anxiety. But if you are a parent who's parenting a high needs teen, you also need to be in therapy, right? You're role modeling that. You're potentially building a bridge for them to be able to access that. You're going to talk more about emotions that way. And then at the end of the day, you are going to be like showing them that it is okay to be in therapy, and then you're going to get the support you need, hopefully by someone who understands the teen cycle and the teen brain and can help you interpret and like access resources that would be helpful. But my heart goes out to you. I'm so glad she's okay. All right, everybody, that is the wrap up for today. Happy Friday again. I hope wherever you are, you were enjoying the day you deserve. It is heading into fall in Massachusetts, and I'm like getting ready to do some pumpkin carving over the weekend and hoping to just like take some time to decompress. So if you are a parent with teens, or if you are a provider who works with teens, don't forget to take care of yourself and put on your own oxygen mask first. Till next time.